Welcome to Section 3 of Enterprise Toronto's Marketing and Sales Bootcamp. This section is all about solution. So it's your product or service solution that you're bringing to the marketplace. Now that you understand who your customer is from Section 1, and also what you're up against in terms of competition and industry trends from Section 2. Is your solution an aspirin or a vitamin? This is actually a really important question to ask yourself because in order to have a very successful brand, you want to be able to solve a real and measurable pain that your customer feels. How serious is that pain and how do they solve it today? One of the biggest problems is that many customers might actually do nothing. Whether it's inertia or the problem, the pain isn't big enough, they'll just do nothing. So going back to the example we showed earlier on, if you were a yoga instructor and maybe you chose to help people that have back pain, you might discover that people who have back pain are actually reluctant to do yoga, or maybe they're not aware of the opportunity, the potential that yoga offers, or maybe they just rather swallow literally an aspirin and hope that it'll go away, the pain will go away. So you have to really say to yourself, when I bring my brand, which is your product or solution, your service to the market, how am I presenting it such that I am definitely solving a real pain to my customer, and only by hiring me will they eliminate that pain. So one of the frameworks or tools that I use to determine the opportunity is to actually look at three things. And these three things are the consumer, which we've already done, and two is the industry. And by that, I mean both competition as well as industry trends. And thirdly, the brand, which we'll talk about more in the next section, section 4. But to determine the marketing opportunity, you really want to look at all three of these elements. And the intersection is where the biggest opportunity lies for you. So by that, I mean, you want to have a solution, a branded solution that is different and unique versus what the industry currently has to offer. But most importantly, your solution isn't just different, it has to also be relevant and needed by the consumer. So the best branding and marketing is relevant. It's also different than what's on offer, and it's highly desired, and it addresses a real or perceived need. So let's go back to our online dating example. Now, there are a lot of online dating sites, and I don't speak from experience here, but I do know that if you were to look at some of the online dating sites that are available, as the consumer, the potential client, there is a lot for you to choose from. And even as I speak, in the past few years, there have been new online dating sites that have evolved. Tinder is really hot right now. There's a more edgy site called Grindr. I mean, they're just, and I just heard of a site literally last week that is an online dating site for people who like to smoke marijuana. So you can, like, it might sound crazy, but you can find someone in any potential segment. I'm sure there's an online dating site for people who like animals or dogs, or for people who are runners, or whatever their hobby or passion is. So it just goes to say, no matter how crowded that market space is, if you can find an area that's currently untapped and there's an unmet need, your solution can help people out with this need. And maybe they didn't already know they had a problem until you came along with your particular solution. So identify your key strengths that differ from your competition and are also highly relevant to your consumer, and then focus all your marketing around that. And something to remember as we go throughout this course, it's always better to be number one in a smaller niche than number 3 or 4 in a big category. So it's like that familiar saying, big fish in a small pond. You do want to be a big fish in a small pond. That is the best way to position your solution, your brand, moving forward. So here's how I applied it to our hair care brand once again. So we looked at what's currently out there in the market and how do we position this new self-developed hair care brand for Black women. And we looked at both functional, and as mentioned again, that's looking at more the actual hard facts behind the product, the formulation, and then also the emotional. That is, how does the product make me feel? Um, because now I have great hair. So it's more about the end result of how the product actually works and how that makes you feel. And what and this was actually quite tricky because there were so many competitors in the market. It was hard to find that white space, as we call it, that sweet spot where no one else is already occupying the market. And that just because it's a white space doesn't mean it's valid. As mentioned earlier, it has to be a white space that no one's currently occupying, but it has to also be relevant to consumers and also something that you can own. So, having said that, we looked at the best way for a new hair care brand to position itself, and it was somewhat in the middle, slightly more on the emotional side. So, for the Natraz brand, they needed to develop a brand voice and visual that both acknowledged the functional elements. You know, it was had they had a natural ingredients, and it was made by a chemist who really understood black hair, but also have a visually engaging packaging. It's something that would really grab your attention emotionally. An example of how you do this is by creating a positioning statement. And this really sums up what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. So for whatever target customer who needs or are dissatisfied with whatever problem they have, our brand is a product or service description that provides whatever compelling reason it is to buy. So, unlike competitive products, we have X unique and desirable features that make us whatever your advantage is. So, you obviously have to fill in the blanks here. And again, as mentioned, find a niche category where there currently are unmet needs, and then market yourself as the aspirin solution fulfilling these needs. So here's an example of how a positioning statement was created for another client of mine. This client is called MD Meal Plan, and they're still in development. But for diabetics who want to self-manage their chronic illness, MD Meal Plan is an online meal planner of individually customized and scientifically developed meal ideas designed to improve your nutritional health. Unlike generic one-size-fits-all meal plans, MD Meal Plan is personalized around your medical health, lifestyle, and taste preferences. It's smart eating tailored for you. So this goes back to what makes your product or service unique, and how is it different from the competition, and what is the main benefit that you provide to your target consumer. Now, we talked earlier about great branding. Great branding gets you noticed, but great positioning gets you the date. So, what I mean by this is that I'm going back to the online dating analogy. You have to look good to get noticed. That's just like online dating. You need to put your best photo out there and you have to have your best headline. But you're only going to seal the deal if you have competitive positioning. So it's not just a pretty picture and a funny headline that will get you noticed. You really have to be different compared to everyone else, because if everyone else who's on the dating site has the exact same equally attractive photo as you and equally witty headline, that probably isn't enough to get yourself the date. You need to really stand out from everybody else, and offer something that is generally wanted but not currently being offered. So by that I mean, supposing you have enough money to have great branding, great website, you are so proud of what you've created, you have enough money even for a Super Bowl commercial. But if what you offer, if your product or service isn't relevant to what the consumer wants, then really it doesn't matter how nice your brand is. You're not going to get the sale, and you've just wasted a lot of time, money, and effort because you haven't adequately understood what is most important to the consumer. And we've got great examples of that in the real world. Brands like Kodak have been around for 100 years until recently because they didn't evolve with the marketplace. They didn't change their positioning. Blockbuster is another great example. Solid branding, they had a national presence across North America, but they didn't evolve their positioning against the marketplace. So, of course, Netflix now has the market share that Blockbuster used to have. We've come to the end of section 3, my solution. Now I encourage you to fill out the one-page marketing and sales plan. So, what is your solution? For X, who need to solve Y, my brand will help them do Z. And after you fill this out, then determine why will your brand win? What is the number one benefit of using your product or service? And then lastly, when you provide your product or service, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on elements like price or speed or quality? Um, Many people might think you can achieve all three, and that's actually highly challenging. To say that I'm going to offer the cheapest price product at the fastest speed and the best quality, something has to give. It's incredibly hard to achieve all three of those. So instead, determine what's most important to your customer and focus on that. So if we look at our hair care product example, we already know how important having good hair and a good hair day is to females. They might be willing to pay a premium price, pay more money for quality. So having a quality product would easily be more important, and you can focus more on that. And by doing so, you can also command a higher price than if you just focused on the cheapest product at the fastest service. Next, we'll move on to section 4, which is how do you take your solution and package it into a brand?